How do you feel? I feel a bit tired, and I wonder how I can wake you up. And I use the time until it's on. Yeah, it's that. To tell you maybe at least 30 seconds what was in my head right now. Several years ago, when I was in the US, we had this nice place hanging around the whole evening, and it was so nice that you really fall asleep, and you could stay there all night. And if the lady from the bar tries to push people out because she wants to close and everybody was asleep, was taking the mic and was really screaming in a way that you were awake in the night, so 2 o'clock, and you take your 1 minute to be voluntary out. So I thought screaming will maybe not be the best way. Maybe the next presentation is it not, but I think it's the last one before coffee, and so I hope to get your attendance for some minutes. Yeah, I'm a German. I have a structure for the presentation I would like to outline now. The first 2 points I can go through very quickly, I think, because Nikki has done a great job to introduce you already to the arts project. Nevertheless, I would shortly say something about why acceleration, then introduce the conceptual framework very quick. We'll have some methodological notes, and I think the most important thing, and that is very recent outcomes from this Monday, I would say, basically, the empirical evidence from 5 cases we have studied and some conclusions. So, Nikki had said why we talk about acceleration. To summarize that in 2 points, there's a normative aspect. I think looking at the urgency of what we are facing now, I think we need to accelerate in terms of transition. That's the 1 point, which was, I think, crucial to us. And the second one is, and you have explained it already, Nikki, that we do not really know what's going on in such an acceleration phase, and what are the dynamics, what are the patterns, what are the colors, and we were really curious to see if we could discover something of that. So that was the initial idea. I think we can skip the research question because Nikki has outlined them, so we can just go to the next. And then we start with a very fundamental question in our arts projects. We say, okay, what changes, who changes, and what does it mean if we accelerate? And I think that's also a kind of a repetition right now. And we thought, okay, the ways people are thinking, doing, and organizing things is what we look at in terms of change. We said, okay, who changes that? I mean, change is very abstract and it's a systemic perspective, but we said, okay, we bring an agency in that discussion and said, okay, local transition initiatives are those we are looking into, and Nikki has already outlined what kind of initiatives that are. He had also the definition, and we started with, okay, acceleration is then if increased pace of change we could observe, however that looks like. So that were some examples, and now more the conceptual work of that. If you see all the circles at the right side, that are our local transition initiatives. And we started to characterize them, and I think it's important to see how we looked at them. And the first one would be that they have different sizes. Of course, they have different members. We have found some with 9,000 members. We have some which are 2 or 3 people doing things, so they have a different size. They act in different domains. I think that's very clear, that we not only look in one domain, and we have different actors. So we really were focusing on not only civil society, third sector initiatives, but also public and private. That does mean something in our kickoff and trace, and when we invited the leading actors from those initiatives, so we had people from civil society sitting right next to those from public administration dressed maybe as Domenico said, and right next to him, the one from the cultural scene, don't even wear any shoes, with the rastas behind. So that was really new, bringing all those actors together, and all were fit to our definition because they were striving for environmental sustainability. And we said, okay, that's the reality. So different actors, not so much from business we had, but in theory they should be in a leading role as well. We need to have them all. And that's the perspective of the arts project. And of course, there are a lot of things running in parallel. They're not all connected, but loosely interconnected. Some of them are intertwined, and some are nested into others. So that is, I think, what we expected from reality. And then the next step was, okay, they are not really, they are not understood as niches, which are somewhere out in space, but that are really activities which are embedded in city regional governance patterns. So we added a spatial dimension, and that's the picture we developed right now. Next one, please, very quick. And then you have seen this picture in a similar way that we said, okay, all the city regions we look at, they're also embedded in a certain context, different national context, but a common European context, and we need to consider that in our research as well. Okay, then I come to the 5 mechanisms, just display them in the picture. Nikki has introduced it very good and brought examples. So going through that very quick, the upscaling one is of one initiative really upscales. The second one, replicating within the city region, so more of the same. And decoupling and embedding and instrumenting, I think it was introduced by Nikki. Let's move on. So we can skip the definitions if you're interested later. Okay, now we come to the methodological things. And I think there wasn't much said about that, so I use my time to spend 2 slides at least on that. I think what is quite new and what is interesting is that we not look at these transition initiatives on their own. That our unit of analysis, you find it there, but our case, we compare and we really investigate, is the city regions and are the dynamics and the patterns within the city regions. And of course we have this context, and I think that's very well described in case study literature. We refer to Robert Yin, a colleague from the US, who has elaborated on that. And so we use an embedded multiple case design. Embedded means that the unit of analysis we look at are embedded in our case. In multiple case, we come to the next slide, just means that we have not only one case, but the 5 cases which were introduced. Some points with regard to empirical data, how we collected that. So we started with desk work to scan initiative landscape, and I think, wow, I really discovered my city new. I mean, I work in the sustainability field for 10 years now in Dresden, but now starting really looking for those initiatives, the small ones, which are not visible. That was really a great experience. So in all regions, we found a lot, up to 100 such initiatives which fit our definition, and we had not a clue that they really exist. And yeah, of course, with the literature review. And then we had a selection process. So we said, okay, between 10 and 15, we would like to study in each region. So we had selection criteria. They have to be innovative in their context, and they should be across domains, and they should led by different actors. Yeah, we chose these initiatives, and then we conducted semi-structured interviews, and the idea was using triangulation, talking at least to 2 or 3 people regarding the same initiative. Insiders, which really running the initiative, some users, which are part for a code forward, for example, or outsiders, which are not involved in this initiative, but have knowledge or can have just some ideas about that. And we had additional interviews with helicopter interviews that were more to really extract city regional governance patterns and to have an estimation what's going on in the cities, who have the overview and overlook how things relate together. Because as I said, we are interested in the patterns in the city regions, not only in the single activities of the initiatives.
What's an example?
I come back to that later. I use my time. I will bring that. So, the last point, sorry, one step back, please. No, back. Yeah, sorry. Just participatory observation. I think it's very important not to stress that much. No, the next one.
The next one, sorry.
Okay, stop time, please. No. Okay, it's okay. We can stick there, that's okay. The thing is, we are really engaged in our city regions with those initiatives. I can say that for Dresden, but also for the others. And that is really an added value. So since 1.5 years from the kickoff of the last year, we have really a trust basis now, which is not easy with those actors which are in general more or less critic to the system, and we are part of the system. Yeah? We are a public funded research institute. So, but that is really great to see, and it gives you really a good insight how things work there. So, very important. Now, empirical results, and I said we have the individual cases evaluated. So we have also the narratives already in our case study reports, and that's really a rich source of information, which I really like. But now, as we would not only look into these 5 city regions, but would like to have recommendations for European Commission, but also for others, how we do that in all the city regions. We need to really see what is the case in every city regions. And so we started to cross out all the things where we could not find much evidence in all the city regions. So what is left is our cross-case analysis. And we go to that right now with regard to the mechanism. Upscaling, replicating and coupling. Okay, stop here. I thought it was small pieces. Upscaling processes occur in different regions, but differ really across domains. So we have really an unevenness of such upscaling processes. And the second important thing is, it's not a universally shared goal by these initiatives. Some say, yeah, sure, we would like to do that, but it's a small amount. Others say, no way, we keep it as we are. Food cooperative with 100 people. We are this 100, we don't want to become 200 or 2,000. And the most say, okay, we had not really an idea if we would like to upscale, but that just happens. Yeah? So we were growing because people get interested in what we are doing. And that is the important point. That creates really tensions internally. Because if you set up this initiative, voluntary, not getting paid for, having no hierarchy there, you can do that with 5 and also with 15 people. But the food cooperative in Dresden, it has 9,000 people right now. It's really difficult. They brought the story, okay, 10 years ago we decided in the campfire, sitting around, what doing next with initiative? You cannot do that with 9,000 people right now. So it's really struggling. So, and it depends on the resources, and it increases visibility, of course. That's nice. I think I have to hurry up. Wow. Replicating is present in all regions, but to different degrees. Really copy-paste things one-to-one, but also partial replication. And we found that there's much more inwards replication than inner replication. We were looking for, okay, people know each other and doing the same things within the city, but no, it was a lot of things which came from outside. So partly we are victim of our methodology because a selection criteria was having novelties. That were 50 minutes now. Okay, I go very quick. And we found that transitioners, we call them transition entrepreneurs, and network initiatives are really important to facilitate this replication. Coupling a big variety of things, rather within domains and within sectors. There are exceptions which we can learn a lot from. I think we have to look at those exceptions where you have across domains and across sectors coupling. Again, network activities are important. I think I have 2 more slides to go to. Embedding instrumentalizing, should we keep it? I come to the conclusions. Okay, it was already. So we have findings with embedding and instrumentalizing. Please, next one. This one, I think, is important. The interrelation of different dynamics. We're just discovering that now. We found, for example, that upscaling can lead to replication. People are not satisfied being member of a 9,000 member food cooperative, so they start their own thing. So when they upscale and share other values, then they go out and have a replication process. Coupling with others means that they also try to do that for the purpose of upscaling or for being embedded or for instrumentalizing. And instrumentalizing, again, is a breeding ground for embedding. So we're discovering that right now. We have those informations, and that's the thing. Okay, it's about acceleration. We are arts, so that is the the final conclusions or the final points with regard to acceleration. I think we have found lots of sustainability-related activities in all regions, and we have the feeling of an increased dynamic there. And as I said earlier, that's uneven across sectors or uneven across domains. We have a dynamic food sector. I think that's really important to say across all regions. It's wow. So we really have to look into that. And what is more important? Acceleration now. Back. Sorry. Okay, you just finished it. I just go back. Okay, that's a very positive point because everybody knows this curve, right? Did you really look at it? Who's here by aircraft? Everybody? Yeah. Would you like to be in an aircraft which accelerates after the takeoff? Not before the takeoff? Can you feel if you're on the aircraft? You need to accelerate before you take off. That's very much the feeling we had in the beginning where we said, okay, we're studying acceleration. That's there in the middle. I have not the feeling we are already there, so on our way, really to the sky. But our feeling was we are like, okay, we are not in the very beginning, but it's more, okay, something is happening. Then we discovered, okay, no, acceleration starts immediately there, also mathematically. So it's going up. And actually what is described as acceleration, that's quite linear. There's no acceleration anymore. So, okay, now the message to take home is the last one. Let's accelerate before takeoff. It's always the better way. Sorry for keeping not the time. Thanks.
Okay, should I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, so this is just a quick question, but in one of your early slides, you said that the transition initiatives were partially nested, I think. So, in terms of your conceptual framework, I'm interested to know what you mean by partially nested.
I mean actually that that we found initiatives which emerged in the frame of other initiatives. So there's a group of people who's doing something, and out of what they have done over a certain time, the same people or a smaller group out of them start new initiatives. So that's not really what is in the co-evolution process, but really out of that what they already did, they start new things, and so they partly part of that. So there's a lot of also interrelations. We found a lot of people, especially in Dresden, that's the case, but in other cases as well, where single individuals really are part in different initiatives, and sometimes they really were started out of another, and that is what we mean by partly nested.
So that nesting can end at some point then?
No, not necessarily.
No, not necessarily, but it can.
Yeah.
I don't think I have a question, but I'm really intrigued by this relationship between the city region and then other networks. So in Scotland, we have a lot of place-based initiatives. So for a small town, you know, not a city, but a small town, there's only one initiative there, but they have networks. So, you know, we have the transition initiatives, and they are between cities. You can see them, and SCAN is another network. So there are lots of networks that cross between the city regions as well. So I think it would be quite interesting to compare within the cities. I hear what you're saying about that there being a kind of dynamic within that city region, but there's also something going on that cuts across that, I think, with these other networks that are maybe more ideological and not place-based.
Yeah, I think that's a totally true comment. And we found that these networks, and going back to the framework, the context, especially transnational context, but also within the national context, we have a lot of networks. And if we talk to people, a lot of those brought ideas and new things from those networks. So they are really important to exchange. And it's much more getting knowledge from outside than within the city region. We have both, but we were surprised how many people get inspiration from national or regional or transnational networks, definitely.
Thank you. The question regarding one of your last comments that especially in the food sector a lot is going on. I was wondering, do you plan also to check why this is especially in the food sector? I mean, it could be interesting. Is it there are the most opportunities or the least constraints or whatever facilitates that especially initiatives are forming in that sector, or is it just because it's the most interesting one, or whatever?
Okay. It was exactly the question we discussed, and we put it forward to our Glamorous project colleagues. We said, okay, you studying the individuals, tell us why they are engaged in the food sector. No, I mean, what we have not really studied it, and it would be worth to really go into that, because I think we can learn a lot from the food sector, because especially from Dresden, but again also from the other regions, this is one of the domains where initiatives really managed to go outside the green bubble. So this 9,000-member food cooperative in Dresden involves almost every part of the society, not only the green people. And so I think we can learn a lot from them. I think there are different entry points to that. It's the personal health. So it's just a lot of also media play a role, I think. So if you look at least in German television, but also Dutch, I have learned there's a lot of reporting on how things are produced and consumed. And so I think the awareness is higher, and you have a lot of entry points. We're asking people, going to this initiative, being healthy, or they got childs and they would like to have other food for them. So I think it's the personal relation to that. And they have the feeling, that's another point, that's a hypothesis, it's not a thing a city or a city region takes care of. You have not a department for food in most cases, so that's a gap. And they fill in that gap to do that. While in mobility, for example, they feel, okay, city is doing transportation planning and mobility, what can I do? Okay, I can bicycle, but that is really a gap. But it's only guessing, yeah.
I'm only just trying to bring one or two of the strands of this afternoon together, but Domenico started with the changing European macroeconomy and social economy. And actually, if you listen carefully to what he was saying, is that a lot of what you've just been saying, Marcus, depends upon how local governance works throughout the European Union. That's what you call the context. I think these 4 or 5 studies which we have here should spend a bit more time on how the changing European economic and social map is affecting the way local governments have got freedom of action, and also whether local governments can have ways of raising revenue in relation to the kinds of sustainability initiatives we're talking about, and whether these come from some variation of public and private sector combinations, or whether they're forced into something much more to do with voluntary citizen-based activity without any involvement or dependency on external public sector funding. None of these presentations have really given us a sense that in the next 5 years we may have dramatically different models of how local government works, how local government is financed, and how local initiatives may be or may not be given encouragement. So one of the big advantages, I think, of this group of people studying this work in the next couple of years is to throw light on that, if I would be so bold as to say so, because if you threw light on that, it would help where Domenico is and where he's reporting from RD, the research directorate, into the wider policy directorates of the European Commission, which don't always listen too much to the research director, but ought to. Because what actually you guys are talking about is actually the way in which the European social and economic map are really fundamentally inhibiting what Richard calls resistance, inhibiting transitions to sustainability, yet that is part of the European ideal. So if you could somehow tease that out, you would actually have some major contribution to make. And I do feel there's an argument here which comes from the city analysis you've just given us, Marcus, that could throw light on the different bits of the European Union. You've got enough players in there to give that insight that we wouldn't otherwise have. You didn't have a DG Framework 7 type of study. So it's a very important finding we should develop a bit in the next day or two.
Can I take the opportunity of the microphone?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Just one element. The definition of local is very different among ourselves. For some very European convinced, the European Union is very local. The European Union as such, if you take the world perspective, 7 billion people, we are a group of 500 million, you can almost say that we are local. When you see the map that I show in the introduction, we are the smallest continent of the world. I mean, what is local? I live in Brussels, where the local, you have the commune, you have the region, and then to whom you should give the power of initiative, if I well understood your comment. That's really something that we should debate. We have in some country regions that does not exist. The nuts to level does not exist. In Portugal, for example, they don't have regions. Then what is local for you? I'm not sure that it's the same that I have in mind. But that's a question that we can raise.
Yes. I promise to answer both questions in one answer. I think for our framework, local means just really being in the urban regions. I totally agree that it's quite a fuzzy word and everybody understands it itself. But I think, and from the context which we study, I think it's very clear what we mean by local. But the other point, I had to overjump that in the beginning, and I had a message also for the European Union there, instrumentalizing. I think the first one, that was your point, it was national context matters. Definitely, we have really narratives where you can see that doing things in Brighton with a UK government background does mean completely different things for the initiatives than doing that in Stockholm, where you have more or less the absence of a national policy in that regard. So we will elaborate on that. And the next one, what was surprising for us a bit, European Union or Commission, some have relations are perceived as bureaucratic. I mean, okay, you shared it with every administration, I would say, from their perspective. That's not so bad. But they're perceived as neutral marker. That's really interesting. They said, okay, if we receive money from our federal states or the national level, we are not really sure what are their own interests. That's the last point. It's a two-way game. So also the transition initiatives can be instrumentalized by the governments. And a good thing, that's the message for the European level, is that transition initiatives do not fear getting money from the European Union because they are perceived having no own interest in the really local things they do. So that's, I think, a good idea. I don't know what you do with that message, but obviously they look for European money and seeing, okay, we are not instrumentalized in that way. So, but and the other point, to finalize, the domain dependence of the influence of the European Union was really clear. So there was really a positive feedback with regard to nature conservation, so directives in that regard. If it comes to agricultural policy, it's the other way around. So those who are doing who are doing different things in the food sector, growing sustainable food, regional organic food, they don't feel so good about European agricultural policy. So it's both sides of the things. But so, yeah, that's basically it.